Hi, everybody. My name is Neil Bonsgard. My pronouns are he, him, and I wanted to welcome you to our February Power Hour, where we are screening Fumes and Focus with our guest speaker and presenter, Lisa from Beyond Toxics. This event is in partnership with Energize Bend, and we want to thank the sponsors of our Power Hour series, Green Savers and the City of Bend. So we are here today primarily talking about gas. And we are talking about gas in the context of how it's used in our homes and the connection between gas use, climate change, indoor air quality, environmental justice, and many other topics. And so this really is kind of at the heart of the work that we do here at the Environmental Center, where we both try to find opportunities where we can address these serious issues on an individual level, but also where we can come together, learn, share this information with others, and ultimately also work on policy solutions for more of a collective action approach so we can change the system so we make sure that benefits are distributed well and that we can address these issues across the board. So with that, I am very excited to introduce our speaker, Lisa. Lisa Arkin is the Executive Director of Beyond Toxics. She's provided innovative policy leadership and grassroots organizing for Beyond Toxics since 2006. Under her guidance, Beyond Toxics embraced the principle of diversity and equity and adopted an anti-racist ethos to become Oregon's first environmental justice organization. Arkin is dedicated to placing human rights and racial and social justice at the forefront of all environmental protection and climate resiliency policies. So with that, we're going to share the recording from our February Power Hour and the question and answer period to follow.
By thanking everyone who's here today. Hi, I'm Lisa, and I really wish I was with you in person. But with a Prius car, I didn't think I could make it there and back with the predicted snow. So I want to thank Lindsay and everyone at the Environmental Center for, first of all, inviting me, and then second of all, being flexible with the weather changes and making it possible for us to be together tonight, even though we're not together in person. But I'm hoping to come back, in person when the weather gets better. So
All right,
I'm just so.
you're all set up on the screen, so go ahead. Yeah, thanks.
Well, I am honored to be here. So again, thank you. And I'm really eager to share with you tonight how Beyond Toxics uses community-based science, a framework of environmental justice to tackle the challenges that we know we all face, as well as the opportunities to address environmental and climate justice and climate threats facing us in Oregon today. So what I'm going to do is give a short presentation about our project, and then we'll show the film, and then there'll be Q&A. And I hope that you all are up for asking lots of questions. So thanks for the great introduction. It was very humbling. Beyond Toxics is an Oregon-based nonprofit. We've been around for over 20 years. We do work throughout the state, but we have offices in Lane County and in Jackson County. We have 12 staff, and we really do work at that intersection, the nexus of environmental protection, public health, and climate justice. And we always are working to uphold the principles of a just transition so that there's equity in all that we do, economics, public health, education, that everyone is being treated fairly. So, working on the problems of climate chaos, we all have a shared challenge under a climate justice framework. And that challenge is to recognize that the adverse effects of climate change are occurring faster than we or other species can adapt to, and that collectively we are not doing enough to stem that pollution and to adopt what science is telling us we need to adopt because of the changes coming upon us. And that brings us to our opportunity to engage together with communities who are most impacted by the hardships of a changing climate. We want to ensure an equitable and regenerative economy with full access to renewable energy, clean air and water, valued jobs, and a healthy living environment. Why are we targeting natural gas and the gas that we use in our homes? Well, what we call natural gas is actually methane gas, which is a fracked gas. And it is the top atmospheric warming gas that is driving climate change today. And in fact, in 2021, at the COP26 Global Climate Conference, they adopted the Global Methane Pledge. 122 countries took this pledge because they also agreed that methane gas is the most effective strategy, well, to reduce methane gas is the most effective strategy to reduce global warming. So that's number one. Methane gas is the number one strategy to reduce global warming. The second thing that motivated us was that when we combust or burn this methane gas inside our homes, this gas fills our living interior spaces, or if in a business, our working spaces, with co-pollutants that can cause serious chronic disease. So this is truly a public health problem as well. In the Northwest, the majority of our methane gas comes primarily from hydraulic fracking. And this is a really dangerous extraction method. It poses immense health and safety risks to the communities near that fracking, and it has been known to.
Speaking fracking.
Pardon me?
Oh, could you hear me?
Fracking is pulling the methane gas from the earth, sometimes in between shale rock layers. It's a very heavily extractive process and is known to contaminate drinking water and air. So again, a very potent greenhouse gas. It's 80 to 120 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide in the first 20 years that it reaches the atmosphere. And when we have fracked gas as the infrastructure to heat our homes and businesses, to run our gas appliances, these are part of franchises that gas companies make with cities, and these fracked gas franchises sort of lock us into the continued use of this polluting methane gas, locks us in for decades to come, and undermines the emission reduction goals as established by those 122 countries, including ourselves, as well as our local goals that we have for our communities to address the threat of climate change. You know, in addition to it filling our homes, it's also being emitted to the atmosphere. And one of the challenges we have is alerting the public to the problem, because you can't see it, and oftentimes you can't even smell it. So this gas is all around us. In every city, I'll just speak about the United States, in all of our cities and towns, we have gas infrastructure. Pictured here are the gas release valves that are sitting on top of the pipeline infrastructure in our cities. These are there to release dangerous pressure levels of gas. And we wanted to really ground truth with science how this gas is completely disrupting the balance of our atmospheric composition. So this gas escapes not only through these purposeful escape valves, but through leaks in the pipeline, through compressor stations, and through the appliances in our homes and businesses. So in this picture here, we're actually measuring the gas that was escaping from this pressure valve. And we're using a very high-end methane detection equipment that we borrowed from a lab to see if indeed there was leaking gas, and if so, what were the levels of it. And so we found that compared to ambient atmospheric levels of methane, which is approximately 2.6 parts per million, that's normal for the Earth's atmosphere, near these release valves, it shot up to 220 parts per million. So if you imagine that happening in every city and town, in every release valve, I know in the city of Eugene, there are about 40 of them that we could find. All of this methane is unburned and it's going up in the air. And unburned methane is a very, very dangerous driver of climate warming. So what are some of the health impacts and primary pollutants that we are concerned about in this methane gas? So when we use our gas stoves in our homes, you know, a pilot light comes on or a spark, and it ignites that gas to form a flame. And then when that gas is being combusted, it emits these pollutants. Number one is nitrogen dioxide. The second most important pollutant emitted by burning gas is volatile organic compounds. And this includes chemicals you might be familiar with, like formaldehyde or benzene or acetaldehyde. Benzene and formaldehyde are both known carcinogens. It also releases hydrocarbons, such as carbon dioxide and methane. So it not only are those dangerous, but all the other pollutants that we very much know are dangerous are carbon monoxide. And for example, that's why it's required to have a carbon monoxide monitor in homes with gas appliances. Because if you should have a malfunction, your home could fill up with carbon monoxide to potentially a lethal level. There's also the emission of ultrafine particles, or also known as PM 2.5. So they're 2.5 microns in diameter or smaller. And these ultrafine particles, when we breathe them into our lungs, they're so tiny that they can actually be exchanged through the cell walls of the alveoli that are deep inside our lungs, and they can go directly into our bloodstream. So they're both a respiratory hazard as well as a heart disease hazard, and are associated with the onset of conditions that lead to stroke. And then, of course, there is carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas that we'd like to avoid. And when we're burning methane in our homes, in our stoves, in our furnaces, and in our hot water heaters, this host of pollutants is circulating and accumulating in our houses. And so there's really a need to transition off and away from these polluting methane gas appliances, because it's an urgent public health issue and it's a safety issue. And the science behind this is mounting constantly. There are more and more reviewed, juried articles coming out showing that exposure to methane gas, it can be crippling to our respiratory and heart systems. Children especially, or elderly, are most at risk, and studies have shown that children who grow up in homes with a gas stove have a 42% higher risk of asthmatic symptoms and a 24% increase in the risk of chronic and debilitating asthma. Homes with gas stoves have 50 to 400% more methane gases and their co-pollutants in homes than those with a electric appliances, electric stoves. So there's a huge difference because with an electric appliance, we're not combusting a gas. We're not releasing these hydrocarbons, these volatile organic compounds, and the nitrogen dioxide into our homes. And exposure to these pollutants most often has increased health harms for people who are low income, people of color, and households with elderly, or anyone with a pre-existing heart or lung condition, or those who have less access to medical care and to medical pharmaceuticals to help them. So we really wanted to confirm these health hazards of combusting methane inside our homes. And we were wondering, how can we do that? You know, a lot of people are attached to their gas appliances. I know I grew up as a kid with a gas stove in our house. And as a low income family, my mother was really proud that she had this new kind of appliance. It was, you know, like the thing to have in the day. And that kind of marketing by the gas companies has lasted. So a lot of folks are like, I don't think I should have to worry about my gas appliances, my gas stove. So we wanted to find a way to make what you can't see able to be seen. We wanted to be able to help people visualize the harm inside their home. And so what could we do to help everyone visualize it? We rented a FLIR, which is a forward-looking infrared camera, and combined that with air quality monitoring equipment to both visualize and to track the rise and fall of pollution when a gas stove is turned on. So this is what the camera looks like. It's a professional grade camera. So this is the same kind of camera gas companies use when they're looking for leaks in their system. And that's a list, this chart of all of the different chemicals that this camera can detect. And of course, of interest to us is the methane in red, and also the volatile organic compounds there in yellow. And volatile organic compounds, as the word implies, they're volatile, they're very light, and so they do move quickly on air currents, whether they be indoor or outdoor air currents. So this is how the camera can help us visualize. So on the left side, you see the flame that's been sparked when we turn on the gas stove. And that's what we see with our naked eye, right? And then you put a pot on it and you're off and away cooking. What the camera is showing us is there's much more happening. In the middle screen there, we're seeing the plume of nitric oxides, including nitrogen dioxide. We're seeing the CO2 and the carbon monoxide and the VOCs start to form when that gas is being heated. So we do see the heat in the red outline there, the red dotted line. And then on the C, indicated by C there, now that we turn a special filter on with the camera, which allows us to detect the volatile organic compounds and other hydrocarbons that are continuing to rise as gases away from the heat of the flame. So here's another way to visualize it in this photograph. And as you can see, it's hard to see in this picture. You can see the bricks behind someone's gas stove there and the outline of the vent. And you can see that the pollutants are moving right around the vent there. So the takeaway for us was that even just cooking a simple meal, we cooked some spaghetti sauce, and then we put a tray of veggies to roast in the oven. Just a simple meal like that, which only required maybe 15 minutes of cook time, 15 to 20. We saw the levels of nitrogen dioxide and volatile organic compounds rising to concerning levels. And here's some of the takeaways that we found. 100%. Okay, wait, let me stop and just say we had that FLIR camera aimed at the stove, and then we also had air monitors placed around the house, one in the kitchen, one in the dining room, and if the residents of the home wanted, we put one in a bedroom. Sometimes if it was a one-story house, just a bedroom down the hall, or upstairs bedroom. And we found that 100% of the homes saw an increase in volatile organic compounds during the time we were cooking, and even staying fairly high for 5 minutes after cooking. 88% or 15 of the 17 homes we tested experienced increases in nitrogen dioxide that are equivalent with the onset of asthma symptoms. We also found by placing monitors in other parts of the house that these fumes traveled through the house. They didn't stay just in the kitchen. They became higher in the dining room, and even higher than that in bedrooms that were upstairs. So that means these fumes are moving through the house, and wherever they're getting caught, if there's not a window open, they're accumulating in those spots in the house. So that could mean in a child's bedroom or a TV area or something like that. And then we graphed it. So this is what it looked like when we graphed the data, and the colors there match the World Health Organization's categorization of air quality. So when you look on your phone sometimes and you're looking for the air quality in your area, and it says, healthy or unhealthy for sensitive groups, unhealthy for all, and hazardous, these are the same levels there in the colors. So we see that, for example, in this house, both the nitrogen dioxide levels and the volatile organic compound levels went all the way up into the hazardous, that's just nitrogen dioxide, went up into the hazardous zone. That's the one with the colored levels there, and the red dotted line and the dark line. So as we cooked, the levels rose up. And even after we were done cooking, they still stayed up for about 5 minutes. And then the gray graph on your right is the volatile organic compounds. And they did rise up enough to cause a health concern. Average rise for the nitrogen dioxide was 157 parts per billion, which is pretty substantial. And the volatile organic compounds, even though they might have gone up 6 or 10 parts per billion, that is still recognized as a respiratory hazard. Shockingly, we also found that the typical vents in homes did nothing to really take these fumes out of the kitchen and out of the house and emit them outside. So the most common kind of vent we found was the microwave oven above a stove with the small twin vents there. And those did the worst. Some people had a vent that came up in the back of their stove, and that did help with the back burners a little bit. And then some folks had an industrial size vent, which actually did the best. Nonetheless, 94% of those vents failed to capture the gas fumes that were coming from the burners, and none of them helped with the fumes that come out of the oven when we open the oven doors. And there, the camera just showed the person being enveloped in the fumes, and we can absorb these things through our skin as well. So just in closing, before we see the film, we do have some recommendations. The first one is that we can all protect our health, our family's health, our loved ones' health by installing electric appliances, and these will significantly reduce the pollutants that are formed from the combustion of methane. And if that's not something that a person can do, then at least we can encourage the use of electric hot pots if you're making some tea, or a plug-in induction burner if you're doing a one pot meal, and that at least will cut down on that kind of constant use we have of heating water or making small meals. And third, if a gas stove is in use, get the best vent you can and open an opposing window so you get that airflow to encourage those volatile organic compounds, hydrocarbons, and nitrogen dioxide to go up the vent. Of course, that's still an atmospheric pollutant problem, and we are increasing global warming, but at least they're not accumulating inside the house. So I want to thank everybody at this point, and please save your questions. I'm going to stop my screen share, and let's take a peek at the movie. Fumes in focus.
On fire.
It's important to understand the risks to human health in addition to the grave concerns about gas stoves emitting some of the most potent greenhouse gases. To help people understand how gas stoves negatively impact the indoor air quality of our homes, we used two pieces of technology. First, we used a Flow2 air quality monitor, which can quantify some of the key air pollutants from the use of gas stoves. Second, we used a forward-looking infrared camera, also known as a GF320 FLIR, which can visualize natural gas, also known as methane, as well as some of the air pollutants produced by burning it. We can't see these pollutants with our own eyes, but the camera can. These devices together allow us to comprehend the air pollution in our own homes and perhaps understand some of the public health consequences as a result from breathing them in. The FLIR camera allows us to see the plume of gas as it rises from the stove and spreads throughout the kitchen, living room, and bedrooms in our homes.
The FLIR camera uses optical gas imaging to visualize unburned hydrocarbons like methane, as well as other air toxics produced by burning fossil fuels. One example is benzene, which commonly comes from vehicle tailpipe emissions, as well as other sources like smoking cigarettes. It is known to cause blood cancer, especially within children, and some autoimmune disorders. The second thing to know about the FLIR camera is that it detects heat. When we film in high sensitivity mode, the camera shows us the heat from the combustion when methane is ignited by a spark or by a flame. This creates the heat used for cooking. In the process of burning methane, toxic air pollutants are released, including nitrogen dioxide, carbon monoxide, benzene, toluene, and xylene. These pollutants are byproducts of burning any fossil fuel, and each of them is known to cause harm to our health, especially our children's health.
And even though the oven is off at this point, those are still all this VOCs. With the aid of the camera, I was able to see this noxious plume that is dangerous. It seems almost surreal. You'd think, wow, look, I'm eating so healthy, but, in the process of preparing that healthy food is also a health concern.
I mean, when I first saw it, it did just look like my whole kitchen was on fire. And I think I was most surprised at how wide it's dispersed. It's not totally unexpected, though. When I walk up the stairs, I can smell the gas. I can smell the food that's cooked. It's not worth it to me to have my kids have chronic exposure to toxins.
The FLIR camera footage from today was really shocking and kind of scary to look at. It's really hard to imagine that they're all there when you've never seen them caught on footage before, so seeing it just made it more real and dangerous.
In each house, we had two monitors. One we placed in the kitchen and the other we placed in the dining room. The kitchen appears as a solid black line, while the dining room appears as a dashed purple tinted line. We started recording 5 minutes before we turned the gas on and ended recording 5 minutes after we turned off the gas stove. As we cooked, nitrogen dioxide levels rose. In this home, they reached red on the Plume Air Quality Index scale, which indicates unhealthy levels of nitrogen dioxide for anyone. Elderly, children, and people with pre-existing health conditions likely have trouble breathing, feel unwell, cough, wheeze, and risk longer-term health conditions. Even otherwise healthy people at this level may notice some symptoms like difficulty breathing, headaches, or lightheadedness. Our data shows that only 3 of 17 homes stayed at a healthy level of exposure to nitrogen dioxide. On the other hand, 82% of residences had unhealthy concentrations of nitrogen dioxide. In some cases, we offered residents an opportunity to place a third monitor in a location of their choice. Similar to kitchens and dining rooms, we found that unhealthy concentrations of nitrogen dioxide spread to living rooms, second floors, even third floors, but most importantly, bedrooms.
Using the FLIR camera, we were able to visualize how effectively pollutants were captured through vents. When turning on vents installed under microwaves, which were the most common found in homes, we noticed that microwave vents were unsuccessful in capturing the fumes from the front burners. The microwave vents even struggled to capture fumes coming from the back burners. As you can see from the FLIR footage, this is concerning because most people use these front burners. As we are cooking, we are inhaling nitrogen dioxide, benzene, and other air toxics. So the question arises, should we continue to use gas stoves every time we cook a meal, knowing it impacts our health? Or should we move away from fossil fuel appliances?
It's a valid argument to look at lead paint and, lead pipes and asbestos. Those were pretty standard building materials for decades, and they served the purpose that they were originally meant for, but they were later found to be toxic and eventually have been banned. And that provides a very interesting paradox, so in as much as we don't want our children eating lead paint, so we didn't allow anybody to use lead in paint.
This is really important because now it's a family health issue, particularly having a young child.
How many people are dealing with asthmatic issues now? How many people are dealing with COPD? How many people are dealing with adverse health effects because of the way we live? And every generation seems to find a new thing that is detrimental to us, that we all believe is a fantastic, look at this great innovation we have using gas to cook with,
Okay, so we have Lisa here for available for the Q&A, and I will try to repeat questions that we have in here so everyone online can hear them. Do we want to start? Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
My name's Rich. So the question I have is, in different socioeconomic demographics, I don't know if there's enough variation, but would you find that a lower income gas stove setup would be more hazardous than a, say, more affluent gas stove setup? Is there kind of a distribution there, or are we all at risk of this regardless?
So if I can summarize, I think maybe Lisa might have been able to hear part of that. Curious about whether lower income setup or just kind of maybe a parallel of that, older versus newer setups and whether they have similar impacts.
Thank you for that question. Well, I think there's a couple of factors to consider here. And number one, some of the homes we went in were older homes themselves. and the gas stove had been installed prior to the requirement for vents, so they didn't even have vents at all. And so the levels in those kitchens were really high, and those were not even captured in the study I just talked about. That was like a preliminary study we did. Also, we went into the homes of renters. So again, a smaller space that would be small enough to have an accumulation of the vapors and fumes. And I'm assuming, though we didn't test older gas stoves versus newer gas stoves, but I would imagine that a newer gas stove might not have a pilot light like the older versions do. I hear there's some sort of more ignition switch, but I remember growing up, the pilot light was always on. And in fact, sometimes we'd wake up in the morning and the pilot light had gone out at night and we could smell the gas. And my parents had to light the pilot light again with match, which is dangerous. But so some of the homes we were in had pilot lights and some did not, probably reflective of the age of the equipment. But it really is particularly for renters who don't have a choice and who might be lower income, the use of gas appliances in small apartments is a problem.
There's a question online about the impact of gas fireplaces, and I'll expand that to other appliances beyond stoves.
We didn't measure gas fireplaces. And again, if they are run with a pilot light that's on all the time, then you're always going to have some kind of methane being combusted. I can only speak from personal experience, maybe with a gas furnace. I had a gas furnace until November, just a few months ago, when it stopped working. And when I called in the technician, I was dismayed to find out that it had been in, even though I had yearly maintenance, it had burned through some of the metal, and that this particular brand was known for malfunctioning. And I kind of wonder if I had been slowly but chronically exposed to the fumes, because only in the last few years have I developed asthma. Never had asthma in my life. I'm not saying that had to be the cause of it, but it does make me wonder, because after it malfunctioned, they revealed that this particular brand often does that. It starts to fail slowly and you don't notice it until it fails completely. So now I have an electric heat pump.
I'll add a similar anecdote that we also had a gas fireplace that was one of our primary heating sources in our house. And after being gone for a while and then coming back to the house, we thought our house kind of smelled weird, and we had a carbon monoxide detector, but in theory, and that's one of the challenges, is things in perfect operation versus actual operation. So in theory, there's an air intake to the combustion chamber and there's exhaust. And so it's not really supposed to be interacting with the air in the house, but through a combination of those pipes getting damaged over the years of the stove getting pushed in and out, and a damaged component inside, we had combustion, like both improper combustion and that improper combustion coming into the house, to the point where when the technician turned on his little sensor, which he's supposed to use like up against the sides of the thing, he turned it on like many rooms over and it was already beeping. And he was surprised that he was convinced that we didn't have a carbon monoxide detector because it was so bad. So yeah, we also have now an electric fireplace and 2 splits. I'm really happy, and I didn't think that I was surprised. And then another question online, and then think up a question in person, is asking about propane and kind of the difference between propane and natural gas in these same discussions.
That's a great question. Very great question. Propane is the same. In fact, in our report, we often say methane and propane, but just for expediency's sake, I didn't say the words tonight, but propane is a fossil fuel similar to methane. I also want to say about the carbon monoxide detectors we have in our homes. Many of them are meant to go off if it spikes precipitously, the carbon monoxide, like an acute spike, and they don't necessarily measure the condition that I had or that Neil described, where there's a slow, steady increase over possibly weeks or months. And you can't necessarily smell it, so.
A comment. So
Yeah.
carbon monoxide detectors are usually on a ceiling, and carbon monoxide sinks to the ground. So sometimes the levels can be higher on the ground and it won't detect it above. So yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Are there any programs to help people switch out their appliances?
A fantastic question. And yes, the state of Oregon has the loans and rebates and incentives. Your local utility may have it. For example, in Eugene, to help me replace my gas furnace, and I'm no special case, and I'm not low income, but I was able to get $1,000 rebate from my own utility, and then I can get a tax write-off if I pay enough taxes to be able to accommodate that write-off. So that's great incentives. And then we're hoping this summer that the federal government will finally roll out the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, in which it promises to have excellent incentives and rebates for installing electric appliances.
Great question. And we'll do this later as well, but Lauren's here with Electrify Bend. And Electrify Bend can be a good conduit for those incentives. And there are tax credits available right now. It gets complicated. Eugene is in some ways lucky that their utility their utility is set up differently. And so they're actually allowed to and do give incentives when you switch from gas to electric, where it's kind of a mixed bag depending on where you're at, whether the utility incentives will work or not. A lot of times you have to stay within the same fuel type. But the federal incentives are specifically around electrification. So there are some and getting better.
Yes, I do encourage you to contact the folks at Electrify Bend. They know a lot and they can walk you through the whole process.
Yeah.
So with the infrared camera, it seemed like a lot of what was being captured was the thermal signature. And I'm just curious if you had done any kind of control with an electric stove and seen how that looked, because I do wonder about how much of that dramatic picture is actually just coming from the things that we expect to be coming from. So the water vapor and the expected volatile organics coming out of cooking. I completely agree. There are toxins and all these other compounds that we indeed do not want in the kitchen. I think that the air quality data is actually, that I think is probably the most compelling. We definitely get a strong visual with the infrared camera, but is there a way, or did you try to subtract out the thermal noise in there to try and figure out more what is the visual signature of the compounds that we're specifically looking for?
I think I heard most of the question, and I think someone's kind of typing it in the chat a little bit, but it seems like the question is, the infrared camera can detect heat, which could include water vapors. And did we use a control of an electric stove? So we do know electric stoves in the process of cooking will emit a small particulate matter, especially frying or sauteing, things like that. But there's no way for them to pollute with nitrogen dioxide because they're not combusting a gas, nor the volatile organic compounds. Also, we didn't show it in the film, but we did often put our hand there. In fact, we have another film on our YouTube channel that shows we can hold our hand there with no heat and the fumes are still continuing to rise. So it's not measuring heat after a certain point at all. And there are plenty of studies done by big research institutes such as Harvard and Yale. These have all been published showing that the difference between a gas stove and their emissions or an electric stove and their emissions are quite different. So we didn't feel we had to repeat those studies again.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I'm just curious because I think it may be the visual may be more dramatic than because it's measuring multiple other things as well. There's a lot of noise in there too. So
Yes, but that's also why we paired it, with the air quality monitor. So we didn't want to just use the camera, but to show that if we placed air quality monitors in the home that could measure these pollutants and tie it with the amount of time we were cooking and the visualization from the camera, I think it makes a very convincing case.
and then one more question. Sorry. My wife's kidding. In one of the charts, you had I think this is on the NOx peaked in the dining room to level like almost twice as high as it was in the kitchen prior to it even peaking in the kitchen. And I just thought that was interesting in terms of the graph, and maybe kind of anomalous due to airflow in that particular home. And so I was wondering if that was representative of other homes that you guys collected with that.
Again, I think I heard it about the levels in the dining room. They weren't double, but they rose at different times. And we did see that pattern in most homes, not every home. So it can be dependent on how the air flows in a home, I suppose. But we did see that pattern.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts that maybe you would want to emphasize in talking with people is how inexpensive a good induction plate could be or is. That especially, one of the things that's difficult, especially for lower income, is that replacing a gas stove with an induction can be very, very expensive or difficult because it's not just switch on a stove. There's the electrical issues that go with it. So that can always be a problem. But I have a gas stove at the moment, but what I have done is I actually have a really nice induction plate, but I could easily have 2 induction plates on that because they run off 125 volts. And I can do about 80% of the cooking if I just think a little bit ahead using those. And really nice one. It really helps. So I think for people who are kind of looking out and saying, gee, this is way too expensive, even with the incentives, just setting 2 induction plates on your stove, and you want them on your stove because you want that vent, assuming they have a vent. You don't want to put it someplace where there's not a vent because cooking itself generates particulates. And the other thing people really want to do is keep their vents clean, because even though they don't remove everything, you've kind of shown that, I think they could optimize removal, even for I'm just, even if they have an induction plate, by keeping the hood vents clean, which is important, I mean, most people don't really like that task. And then one comment, I give talks on cooking and induction and things, but one comment that always comes up is like replacing pans, and I just like, it's really not very expensive to replace. You know, you can get a set of pots and pans, but if people are really resistant to that, there are metal plates that you can put on top of an induction stove, and that will transfers the heat to your normal pots that are not induction ready. And those little plates only cost about $25 or $30. I just got one to experiment. You lose a lot of the efficiency of induction, but it works. So it's just some thoughts of things that might be emphasized while talking with people about changing to induction.
Can I ask you how much your individual induction plates cost? Is there a good quality?
You can get them for about, $100 to $150
Here in Bend?
I shop online. I will be honest though, I have two. One was when I was testing to see, do I really want induction? This was a while ago. I have a $1,500 Reville induction plate.
I know it can be expensive.
But you can do the $100 version. I just happen to be, I'd love to cook. So anyway, the $100 version does a lot of what you need. Okay. So you don't have to go super high end by any means. And the $100 version I got was many years ago. And I'm sure you can get, the same thing. So,
did you notice a difference in your electric bill?
It's hard to tell. I'm in and out. No,
Okay.
I haven't noticed any, nor have I seen a decrease in my gas bill, to be honest about it. It's in the background of eating and cooking. Let's put it that way.
It's not about the bill anymore. So the prices went up.
Right.
So,
Lauren had a comment.
I was just gonna add one other comment. We have the $100 version, and I do 98% of my cooking on it, with a family of 4, and we make it work. But I also have kids, and on induction, they can cook, which is so fun because there's no heat transfer, or there's no flame and no, anyway, it's awesome for that, for anyone that has kids. My 5-year-old cooks, and it's so fun.
I'll have to ask you more about it. Okay, thank you.
Well, we are at time. We still have opportunity to ask questions and wrap up, but I just wanted to put that out there because I know that this is people's bedtimes for some folks, including Lauren.
Neil, I had one other comment I wanted to make. Maybe thinking back to the question about the camera. Some homes we tested had a gas stovetop, but an electric oven. And though in those homes, the levels of pollutants that we measured with our air monitors were significantly reduced. So the oven contributes to a lot of the pollution that we were picking up. Just wanted to mention that again, if you can't quite switch things out, at least only using a gas stove top, but not a gas oven, is helpful. Or at least that's what our data showed.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Well,
Neil, I have a contribution.
yeah, go ahead.
Recommending your recommendations around things. I don't know if you've ever heard of any of the studies that were done by Brett Singer at Lawrence Berkeley Lab, who has really tested a lot around ventilation as well, particulates replacements, as opposed to when we had recommended a really good exhaust. People think the higher the CFMs or the bigger it is better, which is not the case. So I think it's wise to be conscious of that recommendation because that can affect a lot of other things that have wrong ventilation. Too much ventilation in the kitchen.
Yeah, I put that in the notes too. And if it's easier, I can share my screen, or if you want to switch to the slides, Lindsay. I just need permission to share screen if that's easier.
And there's a secondary component to this. The former president likes to say, because he's head of Republican nomination.
TV on in the background.
You're gonna be talking about the
No, but we can after the fact. Sometimes, yeah. Mhm.
electric pipe in.
Political success.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, thanks everybody. We have events coming up, so go to the Environmental Center. Oh, here we go.
First side.
You're at this event, so great work. We have another webinar specifically talking about heat pump water heaters that is also coming up. And we have Earth Day Fair, April 20th, the Repair Cafe, connected but not the same as the work that we're doing here, is a really fun opportunity to connect people if you have things that need to get fixed with people that like fixing things. We do those quarterly. Even if you don't have something fixed, it's really fun to see repair happen. Happy hour in the garden is a regular ongoing thing in the garden right here at our Kansas Avenue garden starting in March. So thanks again to Lisa and all of our folks for joining online. And we'll catch you at the next one. We'll do more of these deep dives in the future. Thanks.
Thank you all.